Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending our webcast today. My name is Rhea Kelly, and I'm Editor-in-Chief for Campus Technology. I would like to welcome you to today's event entitled Defending the Inbox, a Cybersecurity Playbook for Higher Education. This is part 2 of a special webinar series brought to you by Campus Technology and sponsored by Abnormal.ai. So be sure to check out part 1 as well, and that's available on demand at campustechnology.com. In this series, we're featuring security leaders from top colleges and universities as they share how they're defending their campuses against modern email attacks. From business email compromise and account takeovers to vendor fraud and AI-powered phishing, today's threats are faster, more targeted, and harder to detect than ever. Our speakers today are Tiffany Bradford, Information Security Engineer at Boston College, and Mick Leach, Field CISO for Abnormal. Before we get started, I'd like to review just a few housekeeping items. We encourage you to submit questions at any time. You can find that Q&A field to the left of the slide window. Type in your question there, hit submit, and we will field those questions at the end of the presentation. If you have any technical difficulties during the session, look for the question mark icon at the bottom of the presentation console and click for technical assistance. You can also try refreshing your browser. It usually solves most problems. Also, look for the resource list below the slide window where you'll find links to a few related resources. And finally, post-event, you'll receive an email with a link to the recorded version of this session so you can view it again or share it with a colleague. And now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Mick.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm excited to be here. Just by way of introduction, as you said, my name is Mick Leach, Field CISO here at Abnormal. Been here about almost 5 years. Boy, time flies when you're having fun. Prior to that, I had been building and leading operations engineering architecture capabilities at Fortune 500 companies for about the last 20-something years. It's been a minute, but suffice it to say, I've been around the industry for a minute or two. And then like a lifetime ago, I was in the United States Army, U.S. Army Cavalry, so Scouts Out for anybody who knows what that means, for like 8 years. So that's a little bit about me, but you're not here to see me. We're really here to talk with Tiffany. Tiffany, would you do us a favor and tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, your current role, and kind of how you got there?
Sure thing. Well, it's nice to meet everybody, and thank you so much for your time today. So my name is Tiffany Bradford. I work at Boston College as an information security engineer. I actually started at BC about 8 years ago in ITS and have worked in support and applications administration, and now I'm on the security team. So what I end up doing is a lot of engineering day-to-day stuff, but also working with our human risk management program as a program manager and really building out relationships with people and tying in those relationships with the technology we use in order to make campus safer. Boston College has about 22,000 faculty, staff, and students on any given day. And then we also have quite a few, to say the least, of affiliates and then contractors, that sort of things, that do have active accounts with us as well. One last thing, we are a team of 6, if that gives any perspective. I know that, that we're going to talk a little bit about that later on, but you and I have talked before of like, sometimes it's like, oh, this team is this size and my team is this size, and we can talk about scalability later too. But I did think that that would be helpful to talk about and say like, okay, this is a team of 6 security people going like into this sort of thing.
Yeah, no, and that's helpful. I appreciate that context because coming from, from the public sector where things are a little bit different in some cases, we often have much larger teams than in support, right? You talked about 22,000 campus faculty, staff, right? In addition to the students, you guys have a large student population as well. So that's a big group for 6 people to try and defend. So certainly appreciate the challenges that go with that. And to your point, we are going to double click into that here in a little bit more in just a few minutes. But here on the front end, being on the email side of things, that is what's near and dear to my heart, certainly what keeps me up at night. So would love to hear from you. What are the biggest email threats targeting your institution today? And what do you think is unique about the kinds of attacks that target the higher education sector?
Sure. Well, one of the unique things is that we get everything. Sometimes we talk with vendors and they're like, oh, well, we work with a lot of banks, and so this is the kind of thing you see, or we work with a lot of like this industry, so you get these type of attacks. And for us, we get the gambit. And so oftentimes you'll see an attack coming through some schools and the REN ISAC email chains, and then it eventually hits you. But it's very hard to guess like what's coming. There aren't like standard things. But one thing that does affect us quite significantly, especially with our student population, is those like fake student employment scams that were just killing us. And it broke our hearts to not be able, like we were feeling like that we were protecting them sufficiently from these scams where, when you're trained, it definitely looks too good to be true. It's remote, it's a good pay, and you're working with established professors that do research, but it's too good to be true, and it ends up losing students thousands and thousands of dollars that they didn't have to begin with. And so that's one thing that we were seeing a lot of with students, and then with staff members and faculty members, those fake invoices where they have a P card and you did make a purchase, but things aren't lining up and you get confused and you've got a deadline, especially by the end of the fiscal year. And so those things are things that definitely come down the pipeline all the time. But then there's other things that we just couldn't even guess. And so it's nice to have other colleagues that we talk with about these sort of things. But it's also fantastic to see in abnormal, like what we're actually getting hit with before someone complains. Because oftentimes after they complain, it's because they fell for the scam. And then with abnormal, we can see like, oh, this is happening on campus right now. So let's target the awareness campaigns to what we're seeing in real time. So it's a lot. And I think that's why it gets overwhelming sometimes if we care about our students, faculty, and staff, and we want to do good by them.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Certainly can appreciate that. Now, you had touched on some of the threats that you're seeing, and candidly, I can't help but think about AI these days, right? It seems like everything we do AI is at the heart of everything we're talking about these days. And with the rise in the accessibility of AI, how have you seen attacks evolve over the past few years? And how have you been able to enhance your security strategy to kind of keep up with what you're seeing out there?
Sure, I get that. And I think sometimes in IT, we're like a little bit burned out on talking about AI, but it's so important to just like figure out what we can do most responsibly with it. And one of those things that we've noticed and we've started like acclimating to teaching people about is that, before LLMs and all of that became like really, really mainstream. So even like 4 years ago, we were telling people if you see a typo in an email that looks scammy, that's a big red flag. And we still teach people that now, but it's not going to be as relevant. And so we have to teach them other ways of understanding like what a scam email is going to look like. And that seems like a pretty obvious way of addressing that. But then also one thing that has been like particularly scary is the ability for bad actors to create the same email, but with a lot of different send from email addresses. And so we have one person that is, constantly attacking campus from different email addresses, but it's the same sender name. And we can't block every single email address. And so at some rate, like, how do we automate this? And so, the attacks are becoming a little bit different, and we have to adjust by saying, like, we can't just manually allow list or block list something anymore. Not that we did it to begin with, but that's something that we have talked about of like, okay, we have to automate this and really be not assuming that we can manually handle this anymore.
Yeah, well, I will candidly admit I did that back in the day, right? I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the allow list, the block list, this was largely the way that we would block things because, to your point, back then it was pretty easy to identify, certain indicators of attack. Maybe it was always the same username or the same, sending address. Maybe it'd be the same subject line. There was always something that tied it together. But AI today, that's not necessarily true. to your point, right? We're starting to see, attackers can use a different sending address, a different subject, a different, message body. Everything can be different on every attack, and yet scale those up in the thousands. So we're definitely hearing how AI is being leveraged by, threat actors to scale up their attacks. And we're hearing a lot of, there's a lot of chatter in the security community today about AI. On the defensive side, I will say separating the pretenders from the contenders seems to be almost a full-time job. From, you're hearing a lot of things. Oh, we can do this with it. We can do that with it. Some of those things are true, some not as much. So what have you seen, like physically, tangibly, in your role? Where have you seen AI make a big, substantial difference on the defensive side of the play?
Sure. Well, one thing that we keep in mind with a lot here is thinking about a more strategic use of AI. And so we have really hammered home about understanding your horizontal skills. So being self-aware of what we do and how we do things and how can we scale it, but with the same horizontal level. So there's a lot of research saying like, okay, if you're a bad coder and you use an LLM to code, you're going to make probably the same bad code. Okay. But
just faster.
Just thank God, right? And so what are these horizontal skills? So, we mentioned that earlier of these allow lists and block lists, being able to, all of these manual remediations that we were doing are now automated. But then also one thing that we have really loved is that a few years ago, we actually had phishing at bc.edu. And it was manually reply, like someone sat behind a keyboard and manually replied to every single person that sent an email in, and it was just too much, and it fell behind, and it just it wasn't used anymore. And we've brought that back as an automatic type of response. Now that's not for everyone, and we are very much keeping our finger on the pulse of it. I am the human in the loop for phishing at bc.edu. For false negatives and false positives. But boy, howdy, has it made this resource just explode for campus. And it gives us more visibility into what people are seeing. And so that's what we're really loving about the usage of AI is that I have these horizontal skills of being able to make relationships with other people and being able to go out and see these things. But I don't always have the time to. It's a big campus, and I can't just because I go to my friend in one department doesn't mean they're seeing the same thing as someone in another department. And so getting that visibility and then also being able to speak to the concerns of everyone in real time, generally pretty accurately as well, I think has been a fantastic use of the skill we already have, but scaling it at a much more, fantastic way.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And for our audience, don't forget that you guys can participate in this conversation as well. Please make sure you're using the Q&A, the chat bot on the side. You can put in your questions. Tiffany and I will tackle those as we see those, and we'll certainly give some time at the end for that as well. But want to make sure you realize there's an opportunity for you to get in on this conversation as well. Now, Tiffany, you had mentioned earlier about some of the complexities that higher ed faces that maybe just aren't present anywhere else. The fact that you have incredibly complex user bases in terms of your students, your faculty, you've got researchers who just do anything they want to do. Your students you can't train. They haven't met a link they won't click on. I have a lot of kids myself, so including college age students as well. So I know exactly what that is like and the kinds of young folks that you're working with. There's the risk profile for you is incredibly different than the places that I have worked, right? I've been in insurance and financial services in the past where everything's really rigid. We know, exactly what we're dealing with on the defensive side. So how does the complexity that you have there at higher education kind of shape your email security strategy, and how is it maybe different than what I had to defend at the companies I've worked at in the past?
Sure. And to your point about Q&As, part of the complexity is whenever I get up in front of people, they heckle me because they know me. And I think that's part of the thing in higher ed is it's very relational. And so one way that we describe our strategy is with scaffolding. And so in security, we call it defense in depth. Since it's higher ed, we call it scaffolding, where these concepts build on each other, and you're not relying on one specific tool or thought process to do everything. And so, part of the scaffolding is all of the relationships with outside of BC and in our industry, with you guys, with Ren Isaac and other colleges. Another part of the scaffold is our relationships within the college. And then we start getting at the tools and the filters and how this all kind of meshes together. And so the fact that it's so complicated and there's so many moving parts requires that we have, a lot of efficiencies, and then also be very well aware of the fact that we can't just like throw money at the problem without a full strategy. These tools are expensive, like every vendor's tool is expensive when it comes to higher ed. And if it's not, then it's probably a trap like 3 years later. And so there's a nervousness of saying like, okay, are we going to bring something new into our environment? What does that look like? And so asking, is it going to help the relationships with who we have like in the environment? Is it going to make us safer? And then also, is it going to add administrative overhead? Again, we are a team of 6 people, 2 of which are managers. And so it's only 4 individual contributors. Administrative overhead kills us. And so that's one thing that I've spoken with other colleges is like, they have SOC teams, they have all of these resources that are able to address account takeovers like real time, super fast, like very efficiently. And that's something that we work around and that we work together with. And so there's a lot of moving parts. And I'm glad that we do the scaffolding approach, because then if one thing is problematic or fails, then there's another thing. And so if we don't hear about a new threat coming in from Ren Isaac, Abnormal is going to catch it. And if Google doesn't catch something through the filter, Abnormal is going to catch it. And then if Abnormal doesn't catch it, we still get to see through phishing@bc.edu, other people report it and we can manually remediate it. And so this administrative overhead of having to find the problem and then deal with it while everyone's hair is on fire is very much like taken down a notch.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So that gives us a lot of insight into the defensive side of things in terms of bringing technical security controls to bear on the problem. I love the phrase scaffolding, and it makes me think about each of the tiers that you have there at BC. They all interact with email differently, right? So your faculty is going to interact with the email differently than a student will, than faculty, or than staff will. So everybody interacts with it a little bit differently. That only makes me think that it's really hard to train them. It's really hard to tailor your security awareness training and your protection vertically across these scaffolding tiers that you have. So how are you able to do that? How are you tailoring your security awareness training for each of these different layers or tiers on your scaffolding?
Sure. So we do a combination of being aware of what's coming down the pike from like open source intelligence and from the government, from other colleges, and then also what we're seeing in real time. But I want to be very clear. There's a very big difference in someone learning all of this theory about how to keep themselves safe in like a very controlled, safe, coffee is included environment, and then sitting at their desk and being an inbox warrior that clicks an email and replies to it within 30 seconds. And I was speaking with another college, and they clocked it once where someone fell for a scam less than 5 seconds after it hit their inbox.
Wow.
Yes. And so that is something that we talk about a lot with people, is making sure that they feel safe enough, psychologically safe enough to stop and say, I just want to double check. So that's where the phishing@bc.edu comes in. And then also we have other training initiatives that are based on like real-time attacks that we're seeing. And we actually correlate like the data that we see in the abnormal dashboard with what we're going to choose as a topic for our phishing program, for the awareness emails we send out, that sort of thing.
Okay, very good. No, that makes a lot of sense. And because we're in the midst of talking about defense of death and the scaffolding, we've got a great question from Anthony here that I want to actually pull in. Normally we'll tackle these at the end, but Anthony, your question's great, and it's in kind of rhythm with where we're at. So I want to bring it forward. Tiffany, would love to get your opinion on this. I certainly have some thoughts as well, but Anthony's questions here that I'm quoting, lots of universities can't afford defense in depth, but really can't live without the scaffolding approach. So what's the C-level conversation to ensure proper funding? So how does that work in your estimation, your view, and then I'll also share mine as well.
Sure, absolutely. So I think with the C-level stuff, they really want to know why it matters to them. Everyone does. Whenever I did Sunday school growing up, you want to know why something matters to you if you're going to be held hostage for an hour, and so finding the data. And that's something, with universities, we don't have like these giant budgets. And I want to be clear, there's actually a consortium of us in New England. Perhaps we're friendlier than you'd think, given all the times I've mentioned that we have friends. But we have friends everywhere, especially in New England. And the group of us that meet about this product, they're, Microsoft environments, Google environments. And then also, like, I know people that they're at a much smaller private college, and they are the email team and the security team and the IAM team. It's just them. And I want to be them when I grow up, but that's the thing that they're kind of navigating, is it's a much smaller team. So I've seen this scale quite well. Now, when it comes to pricing, that's something that I hound vendors about, is that you need to understand how to price for the higher ed environment, because we don't have particularly big budgets. And then also students are just a different risk profile, which we talked about that earlier. And there tends to be a lot more students to faculty. You don't have like the 15 faculty to 1 student ratio. You have the 1 faculty member to 30 student ratio, or even like hundreds of thousands. And so student pricing, if it's the same SKU number as a faculty or staff member, can kill us. And so that's one thing that we've appreciated is being able to explain, like, okay, the SKUs are different. And then also the real-time data, and showing that students are and have in the past fallen for certain types of threats that we just can't mitigate very well, and we need to automate it. And so there's going back again to that administrative overhead. If it's a big team or a small team, it's still a lot of work that is taking you from other things. And so automating can pay for itself very quickly if you automate the right things. And I think that tools like this automate the right things. And so, for example, whenever someone reports something that Abnormal missed, it can automatically remediate anything else that's the same thing in other inboxes on campus. And so we've seen campaigns that were missed from Google's filter, and even Abnormal's initial filter, but then someone reported it, and it was taken away for like thousands of people, which is fantastic. We never had that beforehand. And so that's something that I can't emphasize enough, is that it's automating the right things. And an example of automating the wrong things is that every now and then I see an automating of building out an environment, and there's no checks and balances. And so then you automate a bunch of environments that don't have proper resources in the back end. And so this is automating with an understanding of where the resource constraints are, and then also like what exactly the human in the loop needs to be. And so that's something that I would emphasize, is that even in this big environment with BC, I only spend about an hour being human in the loop every week out of everything I do. And so the false negatives and the false positives are very, very low, which is what we're looking for in an automating solution. I hope that
I love hearing that. Yeah, I think so. And Anthony, let us know if these the answers are really starting to hit home for you here. Love that. Having not come from higher ed and never worked higher ed, my answer will be a little bit more, industry, private and public sector industry focused, which is in our world, executives tend to measure value on a couple of things: risk reduction, number one, and then efficiency. So is the cost, like in terms of business value, how much risk are we reducing here? Is it making this place safer? And if so, how much safer? Trying to quantify that. And I'm not saying that this is easy to do, but it can absolutely be done. So first, talk about risk reduction. And email is one of those places that's a pretty easy sell in terms of risk reduction. It is the largest attack surface that any company has. And more than that, as it reaches directly into the weakest link that we all have, which are our well-meaning users. So that's something to be, to keep in the back of your mind. The flip side of that is, yes, everything costs money, and security tools are all expensive. I get that. So being able to demonstrate what we're getting for that cost, both in terms of risk reduction, but also in terms of efficiency. Is there automation that is taking, is it freeing up resources? As you heard Tiffany explain, the time invested by her and her department is less than it used to be prior to the implementation of Abnormal. And I'm just using that as an example, but there are other solutions that I'm sure are the same way. So identifying the way that we can save resources in terms of our human capital, the time invested, all of those things, that will also help justify the expense that we spend on any of these things. So Anthony, that's how I've found that to be useful in the past. So certainly appreciate Tiffany's ideas as well. And we've got a quick reply from him saying, thank you. It doesn't work with the for the security team, but often have to field these kinds of conversations for their units. I get that. And yes, agreeing with us in terms of the attack surface and the weakest link and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that going back to you can train people all day long, but whenever they're in the zone and they're not thinking, there's very little you can do besides prevent it from happening at all. And that's kind of where we found the most value to be, is that I can't control anybody, and I can hardly control myself most days. So why not automate that? Very similarly to the same type of argument for like a password manager. We have like little lizard brains. Why not automate the problem away?
I couldn't agree more. I love my password manager, live and die by it. It is the only way. If I lost access to that, I don't think I would cease humaning. I don't think I could even, human anymore without it. Okay, so we hear a lot about, and you touched on it yourself earlier, account takeovers in higher education being a major problem. How significant a challenge is this for Boston College, and how are you addressing it?
I meant to talk to my lawyers about this before answering this. At any rate, it can, I think account takeovers, the problem is that they can happen at any time and that they can spiral very quickly. And so, one problem can turn into hundreds and then thousands and then the whole university wide. We're really, really good about our incident response plans for certain parts of that scenario. And then other parts, we still have like a lot of maturing that we're hoping to do. And so it's nice to be able to have the opportunity to stop things in their tracks. And then also understand a little the environment more. So the way that I explain it to people is that we actually get a lot of alerts about the potential account takeovers. Some of them are, and they're rated by like low probability to like high confidence kind of thing. And it is fascinating to, having been at BC and worked in so many areas. I have 2 master's degrees from here. I know the stories behind a lot of these, but it's very hard for pieces of software to tell the story in an accurate way. And this does a really good job. It's like, okay, this student is signing in from Nigeria for the first time in 30 days. I'm like, oh, it's summer. That's why. And so having a tool that's able to show you that what you need to know, and then you add the context in a very like quick and helpful way is really fantastic.
All right, got it. And just as a time check, we've only got a couple of minutes left. So if you have a question, get it in that chat box right now. Otherwise, you're not going to have the opportunity to ask it. So as you type that, I'm going to ask Tiffany one last question for her to answer before we go to your questions, folks. Looking back, what is one lesson that you have learned that you feel like other universities would really benefit from?
I certainly am not going to pretend that I have an answer that most people haven't already heard, but I do think that automating the right thing, Like you shouldn't automate everything, but it's really important to know which things to automate and to automate the right thing. And I think that that's also a very powerful C-level type thing of like, okay, if we're going to spend money automating something, what do we automate? And being able to make that argument of this is what we need and how we're going to do that is something that I'm glad that I know it, and I hope that other people don't learn it the hard way. And so that's one thing I would say is know when to automate and what to automate.
All
and
right. Well, what's that? I'm sorry.
And what it's worth to you to automate it.
Amen. Amen. Because that time takes that takes effort and time to do. So we have to appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rhea. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us. And with that, Rhea, it's all you.
Thanks so much. Okay, guys, as we close out here, I would just like to thank Tiffany and Mick for a great discussion. Thanks to our audience for your great questions. And also thank you to our sponsor, Abnormal.ai, for making today's event possible. I would also like to remind you this event will be available on demand, so you'll get an email with the link to that recording. And if you missed part one, that link is actually available in the resources list here below the slide window. Thank you very much for attending, and this concludes today's webcast.